And all right, hey there, folks. Since book tour and conventions are still on hold for a bit, I figured I'd bring book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster Season 4, intriguing interviews with creative minds. It's also great to be back in Studio A, my basement finally reconstructed after the Great Flood. And I would have brought my new puppy down here, but she hasn't figured out how to manage the stairs yet, so next time. All right, so tonight, with so many writers out there, looking to place stories in genre fiction, I thought it would be a good time to expand this conversation and have some real talk with the editors, publishers, and writers of sci-fi and fantasy anthologies. On our panel tonight is my friend Danielle Ackley-McPhail, an award-winning, ginger-baking, horn-wearing author, editor, and publisher of eSpec Books. Her published works include 6 novels, including the recently re-released Baba Ali and the Clockwork Djinn, and some of her anthologies include Footprints in the Stars and the upcoming Devilish and Divine. Welcome, Danielle.
Hello.
All right. Also on our panel is my pal, Patrick Thomas, the award-winning author of the Murphy's Law series and the darkly hilarious Dear Cthulhu Advice Empire. He has written more than 40 books and short stories and will soon be publishing the first entry in his Monster Universe themed spy series. Welcome, Pat.
Everybody, thanks for having us.
All right. And rounding out our panel is Marie Vibbert, who has sold more than 70 short stories to markets such as Analog, F and SF, and Amazing Stories. Welcome, Marie.
Hello, nice to be here.
All right. Just a quick heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send me notes or questions you have for the panel in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, so let's jump in. All right, anthologies are a tricky business in that you are assembling a lineup of writers to contribute to a themed collection. So the strength of the book is dependent upon an intriguing theme and the right collections of writers to kind of bring it all home. So from the publisher perspective, how do you decide on a theme? And once you've done that, how do you choose your lineup of authors? I'll start with Danielle.
They throw themselves at me, the themes, not the authors. So occasionally that happens too. I get loads of ideas, and my whole writing career has been based on finding the unique twist to something. So like, for example, I'm best known for the Badass Fairies anthologies. That was a no-brainer. I have an anthology called Dragon's Lore, where lore is spelled L-U-R-E. Why do the legends have so many different things that tempt dragons? So you find the twist that most people aren't expecting, that hasn't been overdone, and let the authors play.
Pat, I know you've done you've been involved in a bunch of anthologies. What's your take on this?
I think you, as the editor or co-editor in my case, you have to like the idea, you have to like the theme. Mm-hmm. The 3 I've done are Hear Them Roar, which was Kick-Ass Women, New Blood, which was new takes on vampire stories, and we had everything from a vampire escalator to a cannibalistically incestuous vampire penguin from Coney Island. So we had a nice variety, of things in that one. And the most recent one is Camelot 13, and I've always been a huge King Arthur fan. And by not limiting it to Camelot and putting it in space in the Old West and noir, we're able to take something that's common and make it new again and have some fun with it. And I think that, take something that and put a twist on it. I think people like that. It's fun to write. It's fun to edit.
So Marie, as a contributor, from your point of view, look, there are lots of anthologies out there. Not every anthology is going to be as appealing to the writer in you as others. What do you look for?
Sometimes I see a call for an anthology and I already have the story. I got to think about some of these, like Punk Rock Future. The story for this, I already had the story. When they announced Punk Rock Future, I was like, I'm going to edit that story, which was called Electric Tea. And it was about a brain-stimulating technology being used by artists in Cleveland, because I'm Cleveland. And I just edited it to add more punk rock to it to appeal to the anthology. Other times, like If This Goes On was an intriguing anthology call Can't Rob a, that's just the title. If This Goes On, they wanted political stories to extrapolate how things are going to go bad in the future if what's happening today continues. And I really wanted to get into this anthology, so I brainstormed ideas for months until I came up with the story that they bought, which was called Free Wi-Fi. It was about a world without free education and without digital rights, really, without, I'm losing, that there's that word for like when the internet is not controlled by the companies. Yeah, we didn't have that. So I don't know, for me, it has to be a science fiction thing because I don't really do fantasy. I want to, but I don't think that I grok fantasy right. So when I try to submit fantasy stories, they always fail, but just generally, if it's something that just speaks to me, or yeah, it's sometimes it's just like, oh, cool, yeah, like a lot of, I have an idea for that. Oh, Do Not Go Quietly, that was another good one. Yeah, and I sent them a story I didn't think they'd even like, but they did buy it because it was Do Not Go Quietly's theme was tales of successful rebellion. And I thought, yeah, we need more stories like that. And I had a story that kind of fit, so I threw it there. So yeah, I guess I'm always shopping for anthologies. I'm always looking out there to see what's open. And if I have something that fits, I send it.
All right, so a little bit of a follow-up there. So what do you most like about working on anthologies, and what do you find to be the most difficult aspect of them? Pat.
As a writer, I think trying to come up with something that works with the theme. I've been lucky enough to be in some of Danielle's Badass Fairy books, and those are a lot of fun to be in. One of the funnest ones to come up with the idea was one called Release the Virgins, which was the only thing is someone in the story somewhere had to say release the virgins. And just the variety of stories they got and just the fun you had trying to come up, once you got past dragons, virgins, and you went, no, it's too many of those, and you went for it. That was a lot of fun. As an editor, sometimes going back and forth with somebody trying to convince them to maybe make a change or an alteration, and also as a writer from the other side trying to, do you agree with the editor, do you not, will make the story better. I think that's on both sides of it is, you want the best story. And a couple times I've had a story published in like a magazine where they're like, cut the first 3,000 words, we'll buy it. I'm like, okay. And then it gets published in a collection and I can put those 3,000 words back in. So I'm usually try to be pretty laid back with most changes with that. But I'm at the point where if I'm not having fun writing or editing, it's just not worth, the time that I have to take to do it. So it's got to be fun.
Danielle?
For me, it's finding the variety. When I do an anthology as an editor, I always require that whoever submits gives me a proposal first, because the worst thing in the world is having to reject an excellent story because I've already gotten 3 others that are almost identical and they're all just as good. So tell me what you're going to do. If somebody's already doing it, I'm going to tell you to do something else, because you need that variety in the collection, and you don't want to have to decide between 2 really good stories.
All right, so we're going to start off from, this is on the publisher editor side. Sometimes you'll get more authors or author submissions than you just have slots for. And sometimes, although it doesn't happen as often, actually not enough. How do you choose who do you want to work with? And if you have a stable of authors you like, what's your attitude about and your appetite for working with writers you've never published before? Danielle?
I do work with a lot of the same authors. I am open to new people. Generally, we have a really generous plan as far as the editing and everything. We give authors an opportunity to polish their work before we decide whether or not we're going to take it. So if an author makes themselves difficult in that process, then I'm less likely to ask them back again, because I'm giving them free advice. I may not even take their story, and I'm helping them polish it. And how they deal with that process is very important. You don't have to agree with us. You don't have to do what we say. If we point out a problem, though, you have to address it in some way. Be willing to work with us, because we're already working with you more than most people out there do. But other than that, mostly it's authors that don't take direction, that don't at least consider what we're trying to tell them when we find an issue with a story. But most of the time, we get to meet a lot of people through conventions and working with them on other projects. So we have a lot of people we can draw on already that get how the process works. And we bring new people in every once in a while.
Pat?
I'd have to agree with Danielle. If someone proves to be a little difficult to work with, you're less likely to want to work with them again. But at the same token, there's some people who just time after time turn in great stories. If you make a suggestion, they either, they take it, or they come up with a compromise, or they explain why they have it. They, don't take 6 months to turn in an edit, because that, if you have someone who's holding back the whole project, that doesn't help either. And as far as new people go, I think it's a great thing. In some of the anthologies I've done, we've had some people, it's their first published story. And in the Agents of the Abyss, which is the series I'm working on now, we have several authors who this will be their first publication, which I think is really great, because we've gotten a lot of good stories. I think couple of the better ones actually are from people who haven't been published. There's a couple of good stories that are mixed in with everything, and we've probably got almost 3 anthologies worth of stories. So of course, some of the people who I've been fortunate enough to have in multiple projects turn in great work too. So, but I think it's nice, because all of us as writers, I think, remember that first time we got published, and what an amazing euphoria we got. We're real writers, and to give someone else that chance, I think that's just the ultimate giving back.
Yeah, that's a great
Or
moment.
paying it forward.
Yeah. So Marie, as the writer, what are you looking for from the publisher or the editor when you collaborate on an anthology?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, they have all of the power, and it's their anthology, and I will die on no hill for no comma. So I'm usually focused more on making sure that I turn in my edits as fast as possible, that even if I disagree with an edit, I come up with a way to interpret what the root cause of the problem is and address that. Sometimes, what they're really pointing out is not the diagnosis, but the symptom, right? So I like to say, even the stupidest edit had a reason. That said, I've mostly been very fortunate with the editors I've worked with. I've had some who are really hands-off. I'm not going to even tell you how many stories I've had published with no edits at all, which is a little nerve-wracking. I'm like, oh God, I hope I did that right. And I've had places where the editor is just, I'm almost like, come on, you bought this story. Why are you giving me a 4th round of edits? So I guess somewhere between those two maxims, like the too many edits versus the no edits at all. I want you to at least find a bad comma splice, so I know you're doing your job.
All right, Danielle. So be the writer for a minute. When you're contributing, what are you looking for from the editor, the publisher? What do you want from them?
I want somebody that I know is putting some thought into the project, and not just putting it together, but where to take it once it's done. A lot of publishers out there, they have a great idea, but they don't have a lot of follow through. I'm looking for publishers that acknowledge that the writer is putting a lot into it too, and offering them at least a token recognition. You know, if I don't at least get a copy of the book, then you're not worth my time. If I have to buy a book to have one on my shelf,
That's weak.
I'm sorry, then you're just making money off of us.
Yeah.
And you're
Or
already
not.
doing that when you sell the books. So
Or not making money. Who knows?
exactly. You know, somebody that puts together a nice package. It's great to be published, but if you end up with a book that you're kind of embarrassed to have on your table, then that's not such a good thing. So it's always important to know what the publisher's track record is, what their work looks like. Sometimes the interior, you know, there's people that I have gone with where I expected them to be professional, and then I get the interior design and it breaks so many of the rules of traditional publishing that it's a little embarrassing. So
Yeah, no, cover art, right? I feel like I've been in anthologies, and I'm gonna be mean, but like I got this book and I was like, oh God, I don't want anyone to see that screaming goddess boobies. But you never know what you're gonna get from cover art, right?
yeah.
That should have been the name of the anthology, Screaming Goddess Boobies,
Then, like,
book 2.
this one's gorgeous. Like everybody loved that one. Anyway.
Good. Pat, what about you? When you're be the writer for a minute. When you're contributing, what are you looking for from the editor, the publisher?
Well, I think Danielle's recognition payment is a good start. But I think also what Marie said, getting some feedback. It's nice to hear what they like, what they think could be improved, because that helps us become better writers. But also that someone, if say they want this change and I won't die in a hell for a comma, but I might for something else. Because a lot of us, when we do so many anthologies, we use the same characters again, and then we repackage them as a collection with the same character. So, you know, we can't change the rules of our universe because somebody thinks it might work a little bit better. I want a collaborator, somebody, you know, I don't want someone who's, no, do this, do boom, boom. And, you know, want someone, well, you know, if you did this, this would work better. And this continuity doesn't work, but this part here, this was good. You know, just someone who's honest with you. You know, you don't want someone to say, oh, this was wonderful and have, you know, nothing negative. I need, you know, you wonder why someone would buy it if they only had negative things to say.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit to continue this theme. So look, let's just face it. Writers and editors do not always see eye to eye. It could be on plot, it could be character, dialogue, pacing, what have you. Now, unto itself, that doesn't make either side fundamentally right or wrong. It just means you see things differently.
Mm-hmm.
How do you resolve those differences? Danielle?
I think it's even worse when they're both writers, not necessarily in the writer role, but they have their own style as well, and you're trying to mesh both. Like I said, if I don't agree with the feedback that I'm being given, I try to find another approach to the problem that will resolve the issue and make them happy with it. Sometimes it you know, like my co-panelists have said, you just let it go, because for this purpose, it's, you know, it's not worth arguing over. But
Well, flip it though. What about when you're on the other side of it, when you're in the editor's seat?
when I'm an editor, if they have a valid reason for not changing something, I'm more than reasonable about it. And if it's something that I feel would make the book better or the story better, but it's not a major thing, then I'll let it go. You know, I've given you my advice, you disagree, it's not that important. we'll move on to something else. But as long as it isn't a problem, like something wrong, broken with the story, then, you know, I can be flexible. But if you don't like my suggestion, find another way to fix it.
Marie?
I draw the only line I do draw is I draw lines on matters of principle, usually dealing with class or race issues or anything involving minorities or people who are in a weaker position in my stories. I will always go to bat for keeping that content because I'm a pinko commie. It's happened. No, I've had an editor say this story would be much better from the white girl's perspective. And I said, all right, you're not publishing my story.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. I walked away. That's the only places that I really draw the line.
Actually, so I'm gonna skip ahead just a little bit because you actually jumped into my next question a little bit, and we'll keep going here. So when you're working on an anthology, right, from whichever hat you're wearing, writer, editor, publisher, so what are your unbreakable rules? Meaning, what do you absolutely insist upon from your collaborative partners, and what will you absolutely not tolerate no matter what? So I think we hit yours, Marie. Right?
Yep, you gotta respect my pinko commie leftist point of view.
Pat, what about you?
I think hate, you know, which covers some of what Marie said, but some other things, you know, just something that's going to be you know, in a story you can have a viewpoint you don't agree with. I've had two people within a week of each other at conventions tell me the same book was the most wonderful Christian book they read, and the other person said they loved how I stuck it to religion, and I didn't do either of those things. It was all in their perspective. So I don't think it's a problem showing, because different characters have different views. And villains sometimes can be vile and everything else, but at the end of the story, the hero can't be vile, if that makes any sense. You know, the villain can be vile, but you can't have, you know, something that's the opposite of what my personal belief, values, systems are. It just, that doesn't work. Unless, like I said, you can work that into a story, but at the end, like almost like the Comics Code Authority, the bad guys, even if they win, they shouldn't be shown to be right, if that makes any sense. So, you know, Nazis maybe could come out ahead in a horror story, but the Nazism is still wrong. It's not shown as a good thing. So you know, people can have the beliefs, but you're not censoring them or canceling them. But they shouldn't, you know, it shouldn't be shown that things that are hateful are right.
Danielle, what are your? This is from either hat, from the writer side or from the editor publisher side. What's your unbreakable rules?
It's pretty much the same thing. It you know, no endorsing hate, no endorsing abuse, no endorsing discrimination, no changing things just to change them because you need to put your mark on my work. You know what I mean? There has to be a reason for a change. As a publisher, I would not accept anything that endorsed marginalizing any group. I also do not, when things become a thing, like alternate gender pronouns or something like that, I feel if somebody puts something in their story, it should serve a purpose in the story and not just be there because it's a trend. You know,
we're not checking boxes here.
Exactly. Flesh it out, do it justice, have it be a part of the story.
All right,
And
so-
don't just do it because everybody else is doing it.
All right, so along these lines, and I want to I'm glad we kind of went down this road. So I've asked this question before on other panels, but I think it's worth revisiting. So in today's, woke culture, we're certainly being challenged to think about what we say, how we say, and if we should say it in ways that we never have before. But there's also such a hyperactive cancel culture out there that as a writer, editor, publisher, it's harder and harder these days to take chances out of fear of being nearly ruined if you happen to upset someone.
Mhm.
So let's look at this from both sides, right? From the writer side and from the editor publisher point of view. What do you say to writers who bring up touchy subjects in their stories or use dialogue that may in fact be the way people actually talk in the real world, even if it may seem harsh, crude, or offensive? Is there room in sci-fi fantasy to make readers feel uncomfortable? Or are we being backed into a corner where we have very few options other than to play it safe? Marie?
I'm kind of the opinion that words can hurt. And it's my responsibility as a writer to safety test my writing and to see if I'm hurting somebody. If I'm hurting somebody who has a marginalization that I don't have, then that story doesn't get published, and that's okay. I'll write another one. I'll write lots more. I don't want to hurt anybody with what I write. And I have shelved stories because I was afraid that they were speaking into another voice, for example, or might be seen as coming out of my lane. And I'm all right with that because Jesus Christ, I'm a white chick from the suburbs. I have every privilege on earth and I can write more stories. So no, I don't think we have a right to write things that hurt people. And I can still bring up controversial issues and I can push the envelope, and my stories, I hope, definitely make people uncomfortable, but it's uncomfortable because it has you sympathizing with a tentacled being that killed and took over a woman's body, not because it's uncomfortable by punching down on anybody in the real world.
I would say you have to be respectful, but at the same time, if someone would act like that in real life, and we're talking, in my case, typically the antagonist, the villain, the bad guy, then they should act like that. And you can write it in such a way that the reader realizes that they're wrong. You don't have to endorse it, but in dialogue and action, if someone acts that way, that's how they act. And, you're part of the story can be dealing with that. That's just, and as writers, I think we should be allowed to write from different points of view, but we have to be respectful. In other words, if you are not familiar with the culture and you're writing from that culture and you're, BSing the whole time, no, you don't do that. But if you do your research, you put on your writer's cap, come up with something, I think that's been acceptable, but you shouldn't be trying to hurt anybody. As a rule, I don't think that person should come out of the story looking good. And I think we can show people being wrong. And in a lot of my stories, redemption is a big theme because I've taken some mythological characters and other people who have done some very bad things and had them realize the error of their ways and work actively to undo some of the harm they've done. And I think in today's culture, people should be called on the carpet for doing something wrong. But there should be, and I don't know what this would be, there should be some way for that person, in most cases, not like something vile and terrible, but just in someone who's saying something that is wrong, but maybe that they can, without going to, going through training and all this, to actually learn from their mistakes and become a better person. And I think with the way it's working today, people are not getting that option to grow and become better. And I think that we need to come back to somehow, because not everyone's going to do that. But let's just say 1 in 100 people comes back from it and learns and becomes a better person. There's stories on the internet from a guy who started hanging out with KKK members, an African-American man, and actually he has the hoods and the uniforms from all the people he got to quit. So these are KKK members. These are like villains. It's safe to have a KKK be a villain in the story, but to have these people realize the error of their ways and apologize and try to change their lives, I mean, that's powerful stuff. And if you've been fired from your job and you can't do anything else, I'm not talking millionaires, but like regular people, how do you come back from that, or does that just make the hate worse? I'm posing those questions. If I had the answers, I'd have a self-help book on the best of us.
Danielle?
Context is definitely important, and the approach to whatever the matter is. You don't want to whitewash things to the extent that it becomes unrealistic, but you want to be respectful, and you want to, make people think. And like Patrick said, you do it in the correct context, as in which characters are doing it, why they're doing it, what the consequences of doing it are, and convey through other characters where that perspective is skewed.
Follow-up question, because it comes up a lot, everywhere in daily life. This idea of, how easily many people seem to be, trigger is a big word, right?
Mhm.
I'm triggered by this. Now, each one of us has our own internal compass and our own internal fortitude of what we can and can't handle. It's impossible to know what triggers every human being
Mhm.
on Earth. And there are some people who are far more easily triggered than others. And those people tend to have the loudest voices as well. So when you're the writer or the editor and you're working on it, how do you handle issues of, if I say this, if I say these words, frame a certain situation in this way, my gut tells me that somebody out there is going to be triggered. Is that a reason to not do it? Or do you say, well, you know what? This is how life is, and you're gonna have to deal with this part of if you want to keep reading it, this is part of it, and you'll have to go with the journey. What's your take on it?
You can show sensitivity. You can make wise choices. Is it integral to the story? Is there a reason to do that? Or is it just sensationalism? I've written some really hard scenes that really moved me and I felt were applicable to what I was writing. But there are some that I left in, and there are others that I thought were going a bit too far. It might be realistic, but it did not need to be there. And that's the key. Why are you writing what you are writing? And is there a way that you can do it to convey what you want, but still being sensitive?
It seems reasonable to say, why have, quote unquote, trigger words or trigger scenes just to have them in there? If they don't serve the story, then it seems reasonable to maybe consider going a different direction. What about you, Marie? What's your feeling on it?
Well, I was thinking about how in the fan fiction community, they have trigger warnings and people just label the stuff and they're like, hey, this story contains X, Y, and Z. If you don't like that, jog on. Obviously, we don't do that in the traditional publishing world. But I mean, I've definitely read some stories that were like, yikes, yeet, out. I don't know what to say about it other than, I mean, if you're reading the big book of gore, you're going to get some gore.
Fair enough.
But I think it's being respectful of, maybe it's almost even more of a marketing question, being respectful of how you present what the work is to sell it to the viewer, to say, this is what this contains. And there's ways to subtly indicate. I mean, geez, Nabokov is pretty triggering for me, but it's so literary.
All right, so quick interlude for folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for me or the panel, send them in the chat box and we'll get to a few at the end of the show. All right, so let's talk about money. All right, making a profit in this business ain't easy. Specific to anthologies, so I'll start with you, Danielle. Do you publish them on spec and take your chances on the open market, or do you kickstart them?
Well, I do kickstart them. Every project that I publish, I kickstart, because when I started being a publisher, I didn't start with capital, and I wasn't going to get myself in a hole using credit like many of the publishers that inspired me to be a publisher, to put it nicely. And so, and part of that is to have the funding for the book so that nothing is a losing venture. If I don't fund, I can't do the book. If I don't fund, then the authors can take their stories elsewhere and they can actually make something on it. But also it's a marketing thing, because generating that advance awareness, even if someone doesn't back the project, just because we're promoting it, they're learning about the book, they're learning about the authors. They may take a chance on a future project just because they see how we work and what comes out of it.
Pat, you've done a couple of anthologies. What's your business strategy there?
I think the Kickstarter is a great idea. I just haven't had the courage to kickstart that yet. I guess, I watched Danielle and she's been very successful. I've watched several other people do it and it's wonderful. But I've also, I guess in the back of my mind, I've seen also a few people who've tried who had much smaller goals and didn't make them. But I think sometimes, if you can at least put the money up or get the money up for a small advance to the authors. So this way, even if the book doesn't do as well as you hope, that they get something besides a copy. I think that's a good thing. But I think the Kickstarter idea is wonderful. And I give Danielle a lot of credit because I've been in a bunch of her Kickstarters. So I think it's great that she and other people have been able to do that so well. So I think Kickstarter is a smarter way to go. I just have not learned it yet.
All right, so I'm going to flip it around a bit. So we'll start with you, Marie. So as the writer, in terms of compensation when you contribute to anthologies, what are your expectations?
8 cents a word and 2 contributor copies. That's where I'm sorry, man, I'm a pro. That's what I do. I will occasionally do semi-pro if I really like the topic or really like the anthology, or if somebody asks me and I go, oh my God, you asked me. But generally I stick with SFF pro rates. I will say that as a writer, I don't mind when anthologies are kickstarted, and although I feel the huge pressure to be part of the marketing team then, like I have to be pimping this Kickstarter. And when I ended up in 3 Kickstartered anthologies at the same time, I was like, my friends, everyone on my social media feeds is going to think I'm just nothing but a beggar. All I do is beg. But it's not going to stop me. I like selling books too much. So.
All right. That was great. But as we do in every show, it is time for us to spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 categories. Wherever it lands is what you get. The categories are Quantum Leap, Trick or Treat, Music Lover, Fear of Flying, Creature Feature, Attack of the Clones, and our newest one, Kick 'em in the Junk. All right. All right, Danielle, you're up first. You ready?
That's nuts.
Maybe.
You ready to face the wheel?
Okay.
All right. All right, and you got Fear of Flying. All right. So you're on an airplane and the pilots pass out. The flight attendants say they need you to take over. Do you hop in the pilot's chair and have the tower talk you through it? Or do you grab a parachute and jump for your life?
I jump in the chair.
You're taking that baby down?
Yeah, one way or the other.
If you're going down, you're taking everybody with you.
At At least I get a story out of it later if I survive.
All right, fair enough. All right, Pat, you're up next. You ready?
Woohoo!
All right, what do we got for you? All right, for you, we got Quantum Leap. All right, you volunteered to step into the Quantum Leap Accelerator, only you get to pick where you go and when within your own lifetime. What's your destination?
Whew. That's a good one. Well, I'd probably want to go back in time and at least see some of the people I've lost, but a historical event. I'd probably try and stop like things like Sam Beckett does, like try to stop 9/11, try and stop the space shuttle from blowing up, try and, do some good. So I'd probably pick a bunch of disasters and try and undo them, and maybe go back and buy some stuff.
All right, you'll have Flugel. There you go. All right, Marie, you're up. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Big money, big money, big money.
Big money, no whammies. All right, you got kick him in the junk. Okay, you can travel to any point in time and space, and without repercussions, you can kick someone in the junk. Who would it be?
Ronald Reagan.
Oh, wow. Did not see that coming.
Yeah, definitely. I kick him really, really, really hard. I mean, yeah, obviously people say Hitler, but I figure there's already a line for him. So,
Ray, why Reagan?
because he destroyed our economy and our social safety net. He put in place a lot of the policies that are destroying the environment, our education, and our prison system.
Yeah, but besides that.
Fuck him. I wanted another 4 years of Carter. I was the only one, but I was 8. I couldn't vote.
All right, fair enough. All right, now we're going to do a little advice column. So we're going to start with you, Pat. What's the best as writers? What's the best advice what's the best writing advice anyone's ever best and worst writing advice anyone's ever given you?
Best I would say is probably write what you like, because as you said, sometimes it's hard making the money we want to make, so we should at least enjoy it. And the worst was probably a college professor who went by all these strict rules of writing that took me years to undo. Don't write in contractions, don't do this, don't do that. He was a guy who never got anything published, and so he decided to take it out on his other college students. So I'd go with those two.
All right, Marie.
Worst advice, I think, is write what you know, because nobody knows what they know. And that's what research is for. Best advice, remember, it's always a shitty first draft. You gotta write the shit so you can write the good stuff.
I like that one. That's a good one for sure. Danielle.
I can seriously say I can't think of anyone that's actually given me advice. I've had a lot of examples. Like CJ told me to go after every opportunity that you can. You might not succeed, but try. I think the most honest reaction I've had is, you're going into publishing? You don't make any money. True, but it's what I have a passion for, so. But
And actually, I'd like to tag on to the end of that. CJ once told me, and he told, I think, all of us, if someone ever
Pat, real quick,
for those
who don't know, CJ who?
CJ Henderson, who wrote mysteries, the Jack Hagee mysteries, Teddy London paranormal mysteries, wrote Batman and Archie and the Punisher. So he did a whole bunch of stuff. And we lost him a few years back.
Oh, you froze that.
we lost you too.
Sadly. You don't know how to do it, figure it out later, but say yes.
Say yes. All right, fair enough. Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes, so we're going to take some questions from the audience. I'm going to go to the chat box right now, and let's see what we have waiting for us. Okay, so one question. Let's see. All right, here we go. Is it okay to have 2 or 3 mini stories within an anthology that are linked? Or by rule of thumb, do all stories have to be their own demon? Danielle?
I think it really depends on the collection and how the stories work, both individually and linked together. I can see the potential in such a thing, but every editor is going to have to decide for themselves if they like that structure or if they're just going to mash them back together and make it one story.
Pat?
I think typically having each story be its own story is much easier, but sometimes you can throw in references and cross strokes. John French and I were in a novella collection with Mike Black, and in my Pink Reaper story, I had the nightmare run off, and do something, and he had some mention of the Pink Reaper, so we kind of threw each other some references, but each of our stories stood alone. So I think it can be fun to do that, but it has to be done the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so here's another one. We'll start with you, Marie. So what genre as an author, do you feel lends itself to the best kinds of anthologies?
I mean, I'm gonna go straight into the science fiction, but I've read some cool fantasy anthologies. I remember when I was a kid really liking one that was called Sword and Sorceress, which was all sword and sorcery kind of stories with female protagonists. I lean towards science fiction. I think the great thing about science fiction is it's about ideas, and ideas make great jumping off points. What one person takes from, robot romance is going to be different from what somebody else does, so that you can all go in different directions and explore an idea.
Pat?
I think speculative fiction as a whole, so sci-fi, fantasy, horror, I think mixing them even gives you a great opportunity. Although, sometimes mystery and other anthologies can be okay. I think the mix of the speculative fiction works best, because that way you could have your robots, you could have Cthulhu, you could have, robots dating Cthulhu. So
Naturally. Danielle?
I think it depends on the length of the stories. So something with mystery, doing a collection of short stories is a little bit harder because you have the buildup and everything. And, if you don't have the length for that, I think horror is particularly good for it because you can have that little bit of intensity, and then you can back off by going to another story.
Okay. So here's an interesting question, and I'm going to add a little twist on it myself. Have you ever submitted a story to an anthology and then later wished you had saved that story for another project? Marie?
I mean, yeah, I've definitely done that. Actually, I've had it go the other way too, where my first sale to FNSF was written for an anthology called Sword and Sonnet, which was Battle Women Poets. And I wrote a thing about a battle robot writing poetry. And I sent it to FNSF for a quick rejection because I finished the story before the anthology window opened. And oops, they bought it. But yeah, I've had stories go to an anthology and I'm like, oh, I should have held on to that for analog, but I was impatient.
Pat or Danielle?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
I have written stories for anthologies where they decided it wasn't what they wanted and had me write another story, and then had people tell me that they were fools for not taking the first story. But
okay.
Generally when I write something, it's for a specific project and it just goes there.
Gotcha. Pat?
I think that's happened to all of us. I don't want to mention what story because, don't want the person who bought it to feel bad that I wished I had it for somebody else. That just seems tacky. But I think, like Danielle, a lot of what I write these days, I'm invited into anthologies. So actually a while back, I started just writing for fun, and I realized, well, what's the theme I got to write? What's the word count? I'm like, oh wait, no, I don't have to do that. So but sometimes you'll write it and it won't be what they're looking for, like Danny said, and then you can sell it someplace else, and occasionally for more money. So
I'm gonna do my own follow up on this. Have you ever written the story, had it published, and then time has gone by, and you look back on it and you go, "Oh God, I really wish I hadn't sent. I really wish this didn't see the light of day."
Every story, like 2 weeks after it hits print. What are you talking about?
That happens more with my novels. Because I can't leave the novels alone.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
I've got some issues with some of my old stories, but mostly I just forgive myself and move on. I mean, somebody liked it, they paid for it. Taste is taste.
Fair enough.
It's a harder problem when you write that story specifically for the Dragon, accountant anthology, and now you've got the slush piles with 9,000 Dragon accountant stories.
Naturally. All right. So here's one. Can you talk about things new or less experienced authors should be aware of regarding anthologies? Where to find publishers to submit to? What should a contract have? Reprints, rights, et cetera, et cetera. So Danielle, why don't we start with you?
Well, the biggest thing is anthologies tend to be a marketing tool, at least for me. And it takes everybody's effort to make that book a success. You're going to get more money out of it if you also help promote it. So don't forget about what's already come out while you're looking for the next thing to do.
Pat?
Consider it an investment.
Fair. Pat?
I think there's a lot of sites online you can check. There's tons of groups on Facebook that'll post, the anthology's open. It's for the love. It's 8 cents a word. You can keep track of it. Raylan.com has got a list on there in terms of finding the stories. When we open up again, go to conventions because a lot of the anthologies I'm in these days, I've been invited into by somebody who I've met. So that I think helps a lot. In terms of, don't sell a story to an anthology that's going to tie it up for, 5 years or, for $10. That seems counterproductive. And I mentioned this earlier, if you're going to be doing a lot of them, try and reuse the same character or setting. And this way you can collect those stories and you can get a book out of it, which I think is a way to take what you've already done and remarket it. Or, sometimes if they take reprints, I've sold several stories multiple times. I just sold audio rights to a steampunk story that I sold twice before that I wrote 8 years ago. And, it's found money because you don't have to do it again. So that makes a difference in terms of that. So I think, don't sign away your rights. There was an anthology a few years back. I did the story I did the edits, and then the contract came and they wanted to own my characters who were pre-existing for no money up front. And I was doing it as a favor to somebody. And I'm like, no, that just, can't happen.
All right. So Marie, last one, and then we're going to wrap up here.
Okay, I've got a lot of opinions. I use the submission grinder, the grinder at diabolicalplots.com. It's a wonderful website, the submission grinder. Check it out. Like Rallin, it provides a online and user updated database of open markets that you can search. When you have a story done, I just like, hey, this story's 5,000 words. I want science fiction. I want 8 cents a word. Bam, it tells me what's open and I send it. General rule of thumb, if it's online, 1 year exclusivity is pretty good. If it's in print, 2 months to 6 months exclusivity. Don't sign away more than that. I agree. Don't sign away your characters. Check sifwa.org has sample contracts that you can look at that tell you what the best practices in the industry are. And always ask for the best of anthology rights, because you never know when you're going to have to say, hey, you have this story for a year, but it made best of science fiction. I need the right to send it there. So that's a clause I always demand if it's not in there.
All right, right on. All right, this has been a great hour. So before we wrap up, it's time for everyone to sell your books. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here, and you're going to see what sort of goodies we have for everybody. All right, here we go. So, are you guys seeing my screen okay?
Yeah.
All right. So, Danielle, what do we got?
Footprints in the Stars is the second book in the Beyond the Cradle anthology series. And this volume is about finding evidence of the existence of other life and how that has impacted
Oh,
in
sorry.
different ways.
Sorry about this. I just have to drag this over here and we'll try this again. Sorry. Okay, great. All right. And where can folks get it?
Any third-party site, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, ordered through the bookstore, our own website, eastbeckbooks.square.site.
All righty, great. And what else we got here? All right, Pat, what do we got?
Camelot 13, which I had mentioned earlier, which is 13 stories about the idea of Camelot, but it can be sent in different time periods, co-edited with John French. It's part of the Padwolf 13 series, which includes Apocalypse 13, Mermaids 13, Fantastic Futures 13, and Lucky 13. So if you feel lucky, get all of them. And they're available at, like Daniel said, all third-party sellers.
All right.
And if we ever have conventions, stop by my table. I'll sign a copy for you.
All right.
And I'm in 3 of them.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we got lots of crossovers here. All right. And okay, Marie, what do we got?
Galactic Hellcats is the story of a outer space biker gang, all chicks, rescuing a gay prince from a tyrannical government in outer space. Yeah, it's available as Vernacular Books is the publisher, and you can get it at Barnes & Noble, you can get it at Max Backs, you can get it at bookshop.com, you can get it at your local independent bookseller, or if you really must, Amazon, that you can get the Kindle there. But
Hellcats, right on. All right.
we
All
loved
right, great. As for me, since we're talking about sci-fi fantasy anthologies, I'll encourage you to check out the anthology I edited for Crazy 8 Press, Love, Murder, Mayhem. In this collection, there are 15 stories from 15 authors, including yours truly and Pat Thomas. Every story includes a mystery across various sci-fi subgenres, including superheroes and supervillains. We've got time travel, space cruisers, and off-world adventures. We've got aliens, monsters, sleep surrogates, AIs, private eyes, and one Duck Bob. Love, Murder, Mayhem is available at your usual sellers. And if you want a signed copy, you can get them directly from me. All right, folks, this has been a great hour. I want to thank everyone who showed up. Thank you, Danielle and Pat and Marie, for giving us your time here and sharing your thoughts. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro, and I'll see everybody next week. Take care, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us.
All right, bye now. See you guys. See you next week.